probably the wealthiest and most wanted Nazi left alive.
Where is he?
No!
Dustin Hoffman, Laurence Olivier, Roy Scheider, William Devane, Marta Keller.
Is it safe?
Is it safe? Is it safe?
No, it's not safe. It's very dangerous.
Marathon Man, a thriller, rated R.
Welcome back to a brand new episode of ReconCinemation. I'm your host, John Diner.
I'm David Munchak.
I'm Brent Hutchins.
And this is the podcast that takes a look back at some of our favorite films from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And we're checking out how they hold up here today. And we are going back to a very special time this episode. We're going back to the 1970s, my favorite decade.
John's fave.
Movies.
We're going to spring, being that it's the springtime now, right into our conspiracy month. So all month long, we're going to be looking at 70s conspiracy films. And this week, we are going to start with an episode about the true origin story of David "Babe" Munchak and his ties to the Division. That's right. We're talking about Marathon Man.
Ooh, yeah.
Ooh, I'm winded just thinking about it.
Before we dive too deep into that, I just want to plug upcoming. We have a Q&A episode, a mailbag episode, if you will. So everybody who's listening right now, hit us up on social media. You can, tweet at us, Instagram, direct message us, send us anything you want to know about the movies we've covered, movies in general, movies of present day or yesteryear. Either way, we're opening it up to you guys. So we're looking forward to that, and that'll be dropping a little bit down the way here.
Cool. So yeah, send in your submissions. Ask us whatever you like. Our opinions on films, our thoughts of the industry, the business, the things we don't even normally talk about on the show.
What our astrological sign is. Go for it.
No harm in asking. Don't know if we'll get to it, but no harm in asking.
The best movies about pizza?
Yeah, what are your favorite pizza movies?
Mystic Pizza. I mean, that's the winner.
That raises to the top at least.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of other pizza movies. That might be it.
Well, would you put Ninja Turtles in there? There's a lot of pizza in that.
It's in the discussion.
A lot of pizza.
Yeah.
It's in the discussion.
It's fair.
Okay. All right. So Marathon Man. Brent, tell us what's happening in Marathon Man.
After the shocking murder of his older brother, a New York history student finds himself inexplicably hounded by shadowy government agents on the trail of a Nazi war criminal who is trying to retrieve smuggled diamonds. That's pretty much it, guys.
Wow.
All right. Thank you, Brent. David, take us back to 1976. What is happening when Marathon Man comes out?
Oh, Marathon Man, which is my first time viewing it for this show, so I'm excited to get into it. But back in 76, October 8th, when it came out, Jimmy Carter is the president of the United States and is named Time Person of the Year. The U.S. is draped in American flags as the country celebrates its bicentennial founding. People are enjoying their mood rings and commuting to work almost exclusively in roller skates while grooving to Play That Funky Music and Disco Duck on the radio. David Berkowitz is in the beginning of his serial killings in New York City, which would eventually lead to a total of 6 murders and 7 wounded. Plus, this fall, TV audiences see the debut of The Muppet Show, Alice and Charlie's Angels. And I am sure something interesting is happening in sports, but no one really cares. John, back to you.
Thank you, David. No one cared about sports in 1976.
Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
It's all in the past.
Were there even sports in 76, guys? Come on.
There's one that we do care about. Marathon running.
That's right.
Apparently.
Yeah.
That's key.
And long lingering images of Jesse Owens.
Yes, that is true. Yeah. Brent, So wait, let me
John?
get this right. For both you guys, this is a first time watch for both of you?
Shh, spoilers, dude.
Oh,
Yeah, first time
yep.
watch.
First time watch.
Wow. That's a first on this show that I'm the only one who's seen the movie.
Is it? I
That
don't
can't
know
be
if
the
that's
first. That's not the
true.
first.
I'm calling shenanigans on that comment.
All right. Well, all right. As far as I can remember, that's
I think Brent and I
um,
shared a few films that were,
It's
first time for
typically the
both of you.
ones that John earmarks that are like from 1940. Good God, when the fuck was this made?
and it made
That's true.
$4. Not the box office or profitability is a measure of quality film. So that's
Right.
not why
That's
we do this.
that is a
I
very valid
I
point.
take that back. Megaforce had to be a first time watch for both you guys.
There you go.
100%.
There you go.
Yeah.
See, there we go.
For sure. I knew there was something
Okay.
recent. Yeah,
Um,
this is first time watch for sure. I've known about it forever. At least getting into film school, it was definitely talked about within there. And the thing that always came up, and the reason that I kind of avoided it for as long as I have, is because anytime anybody talks about it, they really mostly focus on like the kind of torture porn dental scene, and it's like sounds so like agonizing and painful, and just the whole movie sounded very foreboding, and I was like, I don't really want to like I'm sure it's good. I just couldn't bring myself to watch it until something as important as ReconCinemation urged me in that direction.
Yeah, I didn't go to
Here we
film
are.
school, but I've heard of it, and we all love the Hoff from the '70s. So it was always there, but and then there are certain moments that were parodied in pop culture and referenced throughout, so that I always sort of knew when this movie was coming up. But no, I never got to see it from start to finish until this week.
Nice. Well, I am very excited to hear your thoughts as we get into it. This was a movie I actually discovered on my own. As we've mentioned on the show, summer of 1996, my uncle gave me a crash course in 1970s filmmaking and sat me down and put a pile of laser discs in front of me. And, I went through all of them. Marathon Man was not one of those. And really, like it did, Brent, it did come up back at the College of Santa Fe, but
Oh,
we
yeah.
never like watched it in a class. It was never like a
No, it wasn't
required.
like required viewing at all.
Yeah.
There were other
It-
movies from this time, from the paranoia branch of cinema, but like this was not one that was really needed for any of the classes. But it was
yeah.
referenced a lot.
Yeah, it was. And so yeah, I found, the tape on my own and kind of fell in love with the movie separately from all that. Also, I knew of it since I was a very like young kid, maybe 6 or 7. And I remember my dad telling me about the scene, with both like the Roy Scheider scene with the knife and the dentist scene. It's like, why are you telling me this now?
Brush your teeth, John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I've seen it many times, and I was a little bit this came up a couple of years ago, and I wanted to do it for the show back in season 2, I think, and I kind of held off, and because at the time everything with Dustin Hoffman was coming out, and all these terrible stories that seem to be coming out about almost everybody these days, but that doesn't change some of the movies that he has made, whether or not I enjoy them, because as we've talked about, trying to separate the characters from the actors, otherwise there's so many movies that would just be erased, and that's not necessarily fair to the other people who made them and the impact that they had. So anyway, I'm rambling about it, but I was hesitant to get into this one, but now I'm feeling the 70s vibe all over again, and I love the conspiracy, foreboding films from that era. So here we go. What about you guys? Were you, when I brought this one up, were you looking forward to watching it, or were you kind of like, I mean, Brent, you kind of said it already, but
Yeah, I was a little like, okay, I guess we're gonna do this movie. And I finally watched it literally last night.
There you go. I was looking forward to watching The Running Man, and then when searched it to rent it, I was like, oh right, it's not The Running Man.
It's
Like,
a spin-off.
I would have been
Running Man's a
totally more
spin-off.
down for The Running Man. I'm with David on this.
I'm like,
We'll
gosh,
do that one.
Schwarzenegger, like, okay, like we can. So, but that was I forgot. I just forgot what movie I was looking forward to seeing. But and yeah, to be honest, whatever the PR spin and all of that, I forgot Dustin Hoffman did anything, unless other than just being difficult on set sometimes. I don't know what you're talking about. So, um, I'm just gonna leave it at that. I don't even care.
Yeah, I don't want to get into it, but you can look it up online. It's all
yeah.
out there. But yeah,
he's fine though, right? We don't care. Like but the general public doesn't seem to care, right? I think like, he works. He's fine. I think
he
right?
works less. I don't know if that's because of that or that's just his, kind of winding down a little bit.
Gotcha. All right. Well, yeah. So but because it was the Dustin Hoffman in it, I was like, all right, like 70s thriller, let's go. I was prepared. So
yeah, it's funny because the 70s thrillers, these paranoid thrillers, like all the big stars like did one.
Right. Yeah.
It's like Dustin Hoffman does one, Warren Beatty does one, Robert Redford does one, just go on and on. So they each get their shot at it, but they're all different from each other. So that's what we're going to look at this month. But
yeah.
All right, so let's get into it. What did you guys think? Brent, we'll start with you. What was your gut reaction when it was over? Do you enjoy it? Do you have a hard time watching it?
I mean, I enjoyed elements of it. Like, I don't know that I feel like it's a really great movie. I think there are really great scenes. I think Laurence Olivier's performance is phenomenal. Roy Scheider is great. I don't really think Dustin Hoffman is that fantastic in it. And I think he looks really old to be playing like a college student,
He's
that
38.
was like the initial thing that I noticed. I was like, dude, this guy looks 50 and he's supposed to be in college. I gave it a little bit of leeway because he was a graduate student. I was like, okay, sure. But I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of holes. I feel like there's a lot of things that are like seeds that are planted that don't really equate to much. And then, but again, like there are scenes in it. Like, I mean, that the torture scene is really, really good. The end scene, I think their kind of standoff at the end, I think is really fantastic. I like the scene with Laurence Olivier walking in on the street at the end, where like the old Jewish lady notices him, and like that, like the tension that is like brought on there is fantastic. I even like there's the scene like at the cabin that reminded me for whatever reason a lot of like Untouchables, and I was like, oh, nostalgia for a second. But there's a lot of things that just don't really hit for me. Like I don't, he's a Nazi for sure. And Dustin Hoffman is Jewish. It seems like there's a thing that can be used there, but like in all reality, like their conflict has nothing to do with him being Jewish or him being a Nazi. As much as I like Roy Scheider's character, like I don't understand what point it really plays in the overall like story. So I mean, things like that. Like I think the second half is much better than the first half, but like I think that because the second half has all those like kind of tentpole moments, and the first half was just like seems like a lot of laying groundwork for things that don't pay off. Like the whole like flashbacks to Dustin Hoffman seeing his dad, and like the whole McCarthyism stuff, like how does it really relate? Like it doesn't really pay off in the end. So overall, like I get why the movie has had influence, but I think seeing it now and not having seen it in closer to the 70s when we were closer to the whole like paranoia cinema phenomenon, like it just didn't land for me very solidly.
Yeah, all those are great points, none of which I will argue against. um, as much as I love the film for different reasons, but I totally see everything that you pointed out, and it's all there. It really is like sort of sequences that are like connected rather than
Yeah,
like, you know what I mean? It's all about like these intense scenes that are almost like sequenced apart that
right.
have a loose connection. But yeah, I didn't mind it. But we'll get to my thoughts in a minute. David, what did you think?
Yeah, I'd mirror much of what Brent was saying there, and the the disjointed almost first half of the movie, obviously purposely done to that to help create that tension that is going to build. I mean, I get it, but I don't know if each scene necessarily has the full weight that it needs to propel you forward. But I mean, there are certain things. It's like I think there's like he's not just like Babe is he's not uncomfortable in the beginning of the movie necessarily. He's finding true love or whatever in the beginning but we as viewers have to see all these things happening around him before his life explodes. So that tension, like it's very effective, and you're supposed to be uncomfortable, and I totally get it. And I don't think I don't think that's bad. It's not even a complaint. But it's hard. It was sort of hard to understand that as a first time viewer. Like I'm sure if I were to watch it again, all of the things I would just enjoy each. I could live in the moment of each thing and enjoy the performances a little bit better. But I did get a charge almost out of every scene because there was something to like latch onto. Like if there's a Nazi around, your goal punch the Nazi. Like that's the goal, right? Like so even that opening sequence where it's just this visceral, brutal like road rage incident where uh uh I I was just like, oh my gosh, like, and it just turned into something. And then you see that Babe was actually running and did see the fire, so he's already connected to it just in that
Yeah.
little moment. But he would never know what that car fire was, and
Well, what that
um
triggers too, like that's gonna change his whole life.
yeah, his whole life changes because of that incident.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's a I think what it's supposed to do, it does it well. I don't know if I necessarily like it just in general, but I don't think it's a quality issue. It might be just a preference issue in terms of what is being communicated. And then, but it really does come together in that second half. And it was just like, I don't know who to trust and who's going to die and how are they going to die? And is he going to get out of this? And I was just rooting for him to just mess up Giselle, like at the end, just brutal, like whatever you have to do. Like he killed your brother. He's this monster. You have you have him by the like this, like, by the sensitive area. So just do what you have to do, man. Like, because it seems like he had nothing to lose, but he was still trying to, like, there was still a level of self-preservation for him. So anyway, it was just once he was brought into the actual story that was going on around him, that's when I was really on board after that.
Is it safe?
You talking to me?
Is it safe?
What's that?
I agree. It is a really slow start. Watching it back this time, I haven't seen it in probably 20 years, maybe.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, it's a long time before we even see Laurence Olivier.
Mhm.
And it's probably about 45 minutes in before like you're really starting to like get some kind of rhythm and see where it's going. Because they did do that on purpose. John Schlesinger, the director, and William Goldman, the screenwriter, who we'll talk about. It feels like three separate stories that
Mhm.
it takes a while to even realize how they're even going to connect that. Oh, they're brothers. Okay, I get it now. And how Zell kind of ends up playing into it. But it's yeah, it's all these like very intense scenes that are like you almost have to like jump, like leapfrog from one to the next rather than it feeling like one cohesive film.
Yeah.
And again, that's all intentional. And they really, it doesn't bother me though that there's the whole courier situation. Like, I don't think you're really clear how that whole thing works. Because if he's got the diamonds already, like they're in his brother's possession.
Yeah.
What are they like? What are the couriers doing with them? They're selling them, or like for him, or I don't know. I don't understand that.
Yeah, basically to support his way of living, right? So like the US government is letting him be in the US, right? So that he can give them other Nazi war criminals. They're paying him, right, in diamonds.
Yeah, they're letting him have. They're not paying. Are they paying him in diamonds, or those are the diamonds that he's stolen from?
Yeah. So they're letting him get the diamonds, right? But his brother is getting them. For what reason? I don't know.
Right.
It's
and then,
it's all a little unclear.
Yeah.
And then, like
and the division too, like what I know they wanted to be very vague about it, and I do kind of like that. Like, there's somewhere where the FBI and the CIA won't touch. They do it, and they do anything.
Well, right, and it adds this whole like question. I mean, like, I don't know, are they as bad as the Nazi guy? Like, I don't know. There's just a lot of questions about like who they are as a U.S. government group. Like, are they good? Are they bad? Like, it's unclear where they fit in the moral spectrum of things. And so, I don't know. Like, it's all very loose and shaky at the beginning, and it doesn't really. I feel like they're setting it up to be, even with the opening shot of like Jesse Owens, like it being like an Aryan versus, non-Aryan or Jewish thing. And like none of that plays into it at all. Like it boils down to Zell's paranoia about people stealing his diamonds and him thinking that Babe has information about that. And so like he gets pulled into this whole like cluster fuck of things, and it's like it's not race, religion, creed, ethnicity, or anything. Has nothing to do with it. It's a good like element to show how evil Zell is, and Laurence Olivier plays that off freaking phenomenally. I mean, he's got moments where he's absolutely terrifying, but
why? Yeah, but like, and I am not of the Jewish faith. So, but I get the sense that like, without being explicit, it's like in the film that like Jesse Owens is looked up to as a hero for defying Hitler, right? To be better than any white or the
100%.
Aryan race, right?
I mean, that's what you'd take from it.
Right,
Yeah.
but then like without being so explicit, like isn't it like I would assume since the Holocaust, it's like every day a Jewish person lives and thrives and does something is in defiance of Hitler and in defiance of the Nazis. So it's just I'm assuming a cultural undercurrent that's just always there. Every day there's a successful Jewish businessman in the Diamond District. Like every day that they are better than the people who were put on trains and put in camps. Like,
I mean,
is that the idea? Like without having to be explicit, without it's like there are heroes to that, there are inspirations to that. It's a life that New York provides.
And I think as an audience member, like you wouldn't maybe in 76, you wouldn't need to be explicit about it because it's not as far departed from World War II and when those atrocities happened, right?
Yeah.
But as a new viewer watching it now, like,
oh yeah,
like you
have to do a little work to like if you're not of that heritage and faith, like, oh yeah, right, like it's you know it's almost the culture of the time
Right.
that
And
is eroding as you know those generations have died off, right?
yeah, absolutely. And I think though, as a new viewer watching it, to me, when I'm watching the first part, elements of it feel like they're planting seeds for that to be a much bigger, explicitly focused on element of the film, which it ultimately ends up not being.
Well, but well, it
I
does
don't
have.
think.
I mean, it does come back around in the scene that you mentioned, where towards the end of the film when Zell is walking, is just amongst, just completely surrounded by Jewish people, and he is
100%, but it
like,
has but it has nothing to do with Babe and Zell.
no, it doesn't. No, no, that's just it. That's again, that's like his separate sort of storyline. That now he's like in the lion's den, right? Like that he is in the middle of it trying to blend in when amongst these people that he despises to his core, and and then he gets outed, right, publicly, and then escapes. But
Yeah,
Yeah, that scene is so good.
two different people recognized him
yeah,
that was so intense. That was such a
Yeah.
that whole sequence
there is there is a lot of Hitchcockian elements to this
yeah.
film, and that that intensity of those scenes, and there's a number of them, the build up, and then the tension, and then the like explosion of it, in the beginning with the two older gentlemen getting into their racially, not racial, but the religion fueled argument and car
Yeah.
crash, and which was kind of, watching it now was kind of hilarious to me, watching two old guys fight like that.
Well, and even in the edit where they both crash, as they're about to crash, and they're both screaming, and you get a shot of each of them. I mean, they both look like Muppets, like, "Ah!" And
Yeah.
I laughed, like I was like, oh, like I was just laughing because of the visual
Yeah,
alone, because there was something about it. It was so animated and big that
Yeah,
I
it's hard not to find humor in kind of the choreography of that
yeah,
scene and what's going on.
yeah.
yeah
Not Zell's brother, but the other guy is just so
yeah
like kind of over the top. Like,
Yeah.
yeah yeah, he's a
yeah,
big character. So
like I would have ratcheted him down like one or two notches,
yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean the
but
fact that Zell's brother drives away and then he's like, "No, fuck that. I'm going after
yeah,
you." And like
Yeah,
is like, "I'm going to make it a point to ride your ass." And yeah,
it's
it's a lot.
he's almost the bad guy in this scene. Like he runs that red light, like right
yeah.
through oncoming traffic, and like he's the one who's I don't know. Like watching it this time, it came across like that he's more of the villain in that scene. He's the aggressor.
He saw a Nazi. He had to punch him,
Yeah,
and it's like, and I think that's kind of the thing that we see as we're going from watching these 70s films, that there's so many things that were omnipresent out of the time that informed what we saw on the screen, that we lose, like, just as time goes on, those things are eroded. And so it takes that extra beat, and that doesn't mean to say that makes the movie suddenly better because here's more context, but context does matter. And so choices can be more understandable regardless if they're like, maybe they lose a timeless quality they don't have, or they lack a timeless quality. So that's probably why it's important that like these movies just can't exist in them. And well, I just watched it, I thought it was all right. Like there's so much context that can help inform what's going on at the time. So I mean, yeah, in 76, I mean, we're only less than 40 years removed from the end of the war. I mean, or a little more than 40 years rather. And
yeah.
so I mean,
30 years, right?
30. Oh, right. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Jeez,
30 years.
I'm thinking 86 in my head while I'm saying
Well,
it.
there's so
So,
many, at this point, there's so many survivors,
yeah,
from World War II that are still around now. I mean, I don't know how many there are, but there's really not a lot left. So,
yeah,
Yeah.
and they would have had to have been at like the smallest children, like more or less.
right.
I mean, so yeah, it's interesting to look at it now through this lens as the first time. They're like, oh, like this is a movie about something as that needs a different amount of attention today than it would back then.
Yeah. I don't even know if it's a movie about something, but it's in a movie. It's a movie that
Yeah.
harbors, is driven by some of that for sure. And if you are, 60 years past it, it's not on the forefront of
Yeah,
people's minds the way it was, in the 70s.
Yeah.
I don't think
Sure.
I don't think this film is trying to say something on a bigger scale.
No.
I think it's really there's no bigger message for this movie. It's really
Right.
like,
It's just
Babe's sort
context.
of journey and what's happening to him really is what
Yeah.
it ends up being about.
And maybe
Yes.
that's another thing that kind of bumps me is I feel like maybe if it was made today, it would be about something bigger.
Very likely.
And so
Yeah.
like that, maybe that's the expectation that I'm like wrestling with a little bit, that it's wrought with opportunity, but like doesn't really, like it's just like kind of a bit of a red herring.
Is it safe?
I don't know what you mean.
I can't tell you if something is safe or not unless I know specifically what you're talking about.
For me though, like all of that being said, I enjoyed their performances and the characters so much that especially once you get past that first 45 minutes that like I could like kind of I know all that stuff is there. It didn't really bother me overall. Like I still enjoy the movie because these scenes are so intense and these characters are so so incredibly performed that I could just keep watching them. But
Yeah.
So I want to ask about that. So like, I agree that I mean, I think some of the acting in this is really good. Like, and I don't want to, like, I think Dustin Hoffman probably gets credit for this being a good performance, but for me, like, I felt like his performance in this was all relatively kind of one note, like.
Well, sure, but I mean, what else would you expect for what that character is going through? They're just like plummeting down this, this
But not like
spiraling down.
not, I mean, not at the beginning. I mean, I don't know, like something that stuck out of me at the beginning, like early in the scene, he goes into his professor's, you know, uh, classroom or whatever, and he's pitching his thesis and all this. And like, I get the Dustin Hoffman's method, but like he's sitting there like heaving and breathing like he just ran across the campus, which I'm sure he probably did in real life right before he sat down. But it's just so like it's already agonizing. Like just watching him like portray that in such dramatic fashion, I'm like, okay. So then when we get to the part where he's like actually in the scenes of agony, like it didn't land as hard for me because I was like, dude, he's been like at this level the entire time, even though like when he's running through Central Park and he's like, I mean, it's like he's running from getting chased from a bear or running towards, it's just like, dude, okay, like, why is the intensity notched up so high in these early scenes? I know we're going to get there and we have a right to get there because the things that are going on are fucking intense. But like the earlier stuff, like, I don't know, it just seemed over the top to me in those moments. And so like, I don't know, like not that he didn't perform great in those really intense scenes, but like the scenes that you would expect to be less intense, he also seemed really intense. And it was like, okay, so he's just intense. And I don't know, it's a little exhausting.
Well, that's his style. And that was one thing I was curious about how that aged for you guys, because Dustin Hoffman is like, there's a lot of actors that do that. Like Dustin Hoffman is, once he got out of the 60s, really, he became Dustin Hoffman. It's Dustin Hoffman in this situation, right? And this is what he does. He's very intense. We'll talk about the method acting in a second, but that would happen to Al Pacino, that would happen to Jack Nicholson. There's a lot of actors, I think De Niro's in that like they settle into like what their thing is, and it just becomes them in that situation. It's harder to see them as that character. So I
Yeah.
was curious to see how you guys would feel about Hoffman here. I think that's going to probably, looking back at a lot of his films, that's going to come up more and more often. I think that's going to bump people as his way of doing that. And
I don't know. I mean, Tootsie, like, I don't know. It doesn't bother me in Hook, but it like really got me here, man.
let's not talk about Hook.
John rolls his eyes.
Well,
no
Hook,
one can see this.
His performance in Hook is like Jack Nicholson in Batman. It's meant to be very over the top and characterized. So
Sure.
when they're playing like more of regular type people,
I was joking by throwing Hook out there just so I could see the eye roll. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess I just never really like. It never really stood out to me in other movies. But to be fair, I mean, I don't even know the last time I've gone back and watched a lot of his performances.
Yeah.
And I guess I knew that the super intense stuff was coming. And so seeing him play intense early just by sitting in a classroom, I was like, where are we going with this? Because this is already a lot, man.
Yeah. Like if we're watching a movie that's just about like just the first half of this movie, I'm like not interested in following Babe.
Right. Yeah.
I'm much more interested in Doc and Zell, but
yeah, for sure.
But Hoffman in a lot of his films surrounds himself with great writers and great directors and other great actors that can kind of like absorb some of that Hoffman-ness. And once he finally starts crossing paths with the other characters, I think that starts to ease up for us. But there's there's a lot of other stuff tonally that I like about this film. I love visually that kind of that Conrad Hall was the director of photography, and the beautiful kind of saturated lighting style that he uses. I mean, the camera placement is actually very straightforward, and I kind of appreciate that in this film, that we're just like, let's just watch these actors do their thing, and we don't need crazy camera moves. And the music by Michael Small, I think that score just really adding to that bleak undertone, that kind of depressing like downer 70s movie. Those are all things that contribute to that.
Is it safe?
Tell me what it refers to.
And I think, going back to the Hitchcockian element of it, that we keep going, like the bathtub scene, the Doc getting attacked in the hotel room, the confrontation between Doc and Zell, obviously the dentistry torture scene, the scene at the house, the country house, and then the finale, like, are all feel very much inspired by Hitchcock. And I think Schlesinger was very open about that like, there's an element purposely put there,
which makes sense. I mean, if you think about it, at the time, like, Hitchcock
thriller,
is one of the top in the game at being able to establish that kind of suspense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit past his prime, but like, I mean,
oh yeah. He was I think he was done by this point. I think he passes away in 1979.
Yeah, I was trying to think when the Alfred Hitchcock Presents stuff was coming out, but that was obviously not
I think, in
directly
the 60s.
related to him. Yeah.
And I like the theme overall of endurance, that it's about Babe. He's running away from confrontation. That's what that represents, is that the what happened with his father, the McCarthyism, and his father's suicide, that he has been running away from. That's sort of a separate thing, just to really inform the character. You're right, it doesn't really come back plot wise, other than the handgun itself. but
Yeah.
you know, in general, it sets him on this path of like running away from confrontation, and that's what, you know, he's never really able to confront something like in the first scene where he's running around Central Park, and that other jogger, the other marathon runner, he just like can't catch up to him. And the guy like
Right.
gives him the finger and keeps going. But you know, that's like, and by the end, you know, where his character's gone is that now he can turn around and he confronts, you know, has the final confrontation with Zell, and that I think is meant to show the, you know, how that character has progressed.
Yeah, he could have kept running in the end. He could have gotten away. Zell's not a formidable opponent unless you
Yeah.
he got
He's
too
not going to be
close.
running after you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Although
I
the
do-
little blade thing is pretty cool, but that's not
pretty
gonna
cool.
that's not gonna get you.
Well, and I like it's just the thing, like there's that whole cultural undertone of Jewishness in America in 76, right? But then Babe needs something of like, well, why, how did he get to today? And okay, so he's some of that trauma with his father and then his relationship with his brother, but he is not living a life that has anything to do with all this other stuff. Like, he's so out of his depth once he's brought into it that he's brought in, and his brother is killed, or he dies in front of him, right? And then he has to, that panic of them breaking into the bathroom. I mean, that was great. That was like, it ratcheted up all the intensity immediately for him. And then
Because he's so
enjoy the
helpless.
torture.
Like you know,
Yeah.
he's alone, naked
Naked in a bathroom. I mean, it's just like, is
in
there
a
any
bathroom.
like, what do you do? And you can't get
Yeah.
out, and they're in the dark. Like, so yeah, it's almost like you only just get a little piece to color his character. You need a little something. Otherwise, he's a blank slate. We could all project ourselves onto the character and all that, but that's not interesting. You want to give him something, right? But most of these thrillers it seems like it features at least someone who's competent in whatever they're doing, and they're living their life, and then suddenly these just unbelievable forces crash into that character, and they have to figure out a way to survive or get through it and all that. And so, I mean, it does, his history doesn't have to play, but I think throwing away the gun and at the end, and like you said, John, the confrontation, it's like his arc is complete, like from who he was until 2 days prior, you know. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
he becomes a totally different character. So it is a nice little quick poetry, because without that backstory, I didn't need more of that, because it's stuff that happened to him as a child. It's just
Yeah. I mean,
who he is today, you know.
and that's, I mean, that's a fair point. I think for me, like the McCarthyism thing and the whole flashback deal is just like at the beginning where it's the seed is planted. Like, it seems like it's another missed opportunity to connect dots to something. Whereas, like, you know, I think obviously we know Nazis are bad, but we're talking about a time where everybody in the US is having trouble with trusting government, and there's this paranoia and things like that. And so I think it works as a way to show that evils can come from other places than just the Nazis in this story, right?
Oh yeah.
But like, it doesn't, like, you know, like, it doesn't really do that. Like, it just kind of fades away. And yeah, to your point, like, okay, they tie the bow on it and maybe they connect it with like the throwing of the gun, and that seems fine. But I don't feel like they actually use it to show like the evil of the government versus Zell in this story, you know, because I just don't think they really get into what the government's involvement is in any of this. Like, it's all really like uber vague, which may have been intentional, but also
It is a little
think
easy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're not the CIA. It's the if you thought the CIA was bad,
Yeah.
there's this whole other thing you never heard of called the
Right.
division.
So
Like,
you know, I mean, that's
whoa.
all I'm saying. Like, at the beginning,
Yeah.
it seems like it's, oh God, they're setting up all these really interesting things. There's 3 different stories. I mean, how many times are there you know, a bunch of movies, especially in thrillers, have to take that time to set up 3 different things, because you know at some point it's all going to come together, and that's going to reveal the outcome in the finale where, you know, you get past the suspense and you get your resolution. But like in this, they plant all the seeds and they have all this different stuff, and like really, it doesn't lead to anything.
I think
And
could.
that's my biggest takeaway. Like that's my
Yeah.
biggest like gripe, I think.
I think you could, or you know, in hindsight, you could probably have had a connection between the McCarthy hearings and what was done to their father, right? And now what the division / the government is doing to Doc and Babe, right? You could draw a parallel that it's literally driving them to their deaths.
Yeah, you can, because you have to draw that
Right.
parallel,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah, but
they don't really
they
they
don't
don't really
lean on
give
it.
you they don't really give you that parallel. You're just like,
Yeah.
I need to make this make sense, so I'm gonna say this so that it connects, you know. And it's like,
Yeah, totally.
you know,
It-
that's it. That's again, moment to moment, there's like incredible things like happening in the second half of this thing, but the
Yeah.
beginning is just like kind of a mess.
I think like a modern filmmaker would like, he comes home to his apartment at the end of the movie and the door is fixed on his bathroom and there's a note that just says the division thanks you, and he's got to be like and then credits, like, oh Jesus. Does it have to be this overt like, we're still watching you, like,
yeah, for sure.
Let's talk about Roy Scheider for a sec, because I think Roy Scheider is so underrated as an actor. I think he's underappreciated for, you know, he's in so many great films from, especially from the 70s, whether it's French Connection, Jaws, this, All That Jazz, Sorcerer, you know, it goes the 7-Ups, like it goes on and on. And he's one of those actors that he was always, you know, great. And I think he's perfect casting for the Doc role. That believable in Babe's eyes, totally believable as this just rich kind of oil man, businessman. And then we see the reality of it. Like, no, he's a spy, and you know, can handle himself in the action scenes and also in the dramatic scenes with, you know, confronting Zell. And but did you catch the relationship between Doc and Janeway?
they're
Well,
not just best friends.
well,
They're a couple.
in the book, yeah, in the book they're a
Oh.
lot more explicit about that. I was reading about that like in the book they're like in a relationship. They're like
Yeah.
partners.
Well, and
But-
it's very subtle in the movie, but
Super subtle.
When Doc gets to the hotel,
one look.
well, when Doc gets to the hotel, he calls Janie and telling him, I mean, it's like he's talking to his girlfriend, like telling him to get
That's
his ass
true. I didn't
over
even
there.
pick up on that.
That's
Janie.
Janie
Oh.
is Janeway.
Oh hell.
So, and that's all there is, you know, and then just, yeah, like a look in the,
Yeah,
in-
I just knew the one look, but I didn't pick up on the Janie, but that's valid.
I
I
like
in the
the
book
subtlety
apparently
to it.
it's much more explicit. Like it's,
Oh yeah, no, they're like in love with each other, I think, in the
Yeah.
book.
Janie betrayed him.
Exactly. And
Oh.
William Devane, great performance. You know, we talked about him in our Rolling Thunder episode. You can dig that out in the archives at ReconCinemation.com. Another great actor, who, you know, he still pops up kind of here and there. He's still around.
Sure.
Always good, very good in 24.
Loved him in
Remembers
24.
that show?
I like that show.
which season was he in of 24? Was he
He's
in,
in
all
a
of them?
few different ones. He kind of comes and goes.
Yeah, the last thing I remember seeing him in was Interstellar, I think.
You didn't understand?
Yeah, he
That
had
was Matthew McConaughey.
that movie. Yeah, you're right.
And Matt Damon too, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, they're both in it, but so is William Devane.
No, that's John Lithgow. You're thinking of the wrong guy.
Okay, sure.
I'm making jokes.
You got him. You got him. You got all the jokes.
I remember when I first saw this the first time, when after he's violently killed, and he's not killed right away. You know, he gets gutted really by Zell, and that's a just really intense scene, and so you could feel the pain because he's not even yelling, like he's just gasping,
just gargling. Like,
yeah,
is that the reveal of the knife?
yeah,
Of the wrist blade?
yeah. That's the you see him put the when he's on the airplane, Zell. You see him like putting on that metal like cufflink,
Yeah,
but
that's
you
the
don't
first
know
time
what
you
that
see
is.
it in action.
Yeah,
And they don't even, they kind of hide it there, right?
yeah. Well, you don't actually see the blade. I mean, you just know he stabbed him with something.
Yeah,
You know?
but you don't see I don't think you see the blade fully until he slices that dude's neck in the street, like
Right.
during
Yeah,
the
you
other
see it,
scene. And you're like, oh, damn.
yeah.
Baraka.
There's 3 scenes with it: when he kills Doc, when he kills the guy in the street, and then at the very end when he falls on it.
Yeah.
I was always so heartbroken though that like that's Martin Brody. Just killed Martin Brody.
Yeah, you'd think he would have been able to do something about it, you know? The fact that he got caught so unawares is
Yeah, it was.
But yeah,
it's
rough. It was
surprising
hard to
that
see.
like he wasn't, expecting something like that to happen. I mean, he's already walking into a meeting where he's outnumbered. He has no backup.
Yeah.
Which is also like, what is Janeway doing? Like, how much does the division actually even know what's going on here?
Right.
Well, and like with all these bad guys dealing with each other, like there's it's about mutual like destruction, right? Like they would be, it would be unlikely that they would betray and kill one another because they're both trying to gain something. So it's a big power move for Zell to do that. So it's, I mean, I can kind of get it, but sometimes people are caught unaware.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
that
I
was
don't think anybody
tough.
expects some 80-year-old dude to be having like a freaking James Bond gadget knife on his wrist. I'm pretty
Well, that's
sure.
where that's where you find out like how bad this guy is, like how literally how lethal he is.
Is it safe?
Yes, it's safe. It's very safe. It's so safe you wouldn't believe it.
Yeah. I think, man, the looks on his face during the dentist scene are
He's
incredible.
Like, Laurence Olivier is so incredible in this role. Like he transforms his face almost. It's an amazing performance, and
he's acting.
Yeah, exactly.
Acting.
Yeah.
Showing Dustin Hoffman how to act.
Yeah. Well, that's So whoever doesn't know that story, we'll tell it here. That during that scene, Laurence Olivier and Dustin Hoffman came from two very different schools of acting. Yes. Laurence Olivier was classically trained theatrical actor. He's all about the sticking to the script and really knowing his performance. Dustin Hoffman came up as a method actor and like lives the performance. He becomes the character and 24/7, and he was running laps around the building, the stage where they were shooting it, and he stayed up for days. He stayed up for like 3 days straight.
Hadn't showered, just was a mess.
So when they're in the middle of shooting this scene and Hoffman's having a hard time, Laurence Olivier just turns to John Schlesinger, the director, and just says, has he tried acting?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
There is something to that though, because like, is method acting really as artistic as what like you're trying to do? Because it seems just more like a psychological exercise for the actor and nobody else.
It is, but
it's miserable.
If acting
it's
is
miserable for the crew, I can tell you that much. You have to kind of deal with that.
Maybe. I mean, I believe, yes, that is fact. But I also think, like, I don't want to discredit method because how many amazing performances have we gotten? Because, I mean, think about it. Like, acting is about a performance. How you get to that spot is the argument, right? But, like, there's so many incredibly talented actors who are method, who give some of the greatest performances. Yeah. But that sounds like torture. Like not torture for the people around them, for sure. Like, you hear the stories of having to like refer to the person by the character's name throughout shooting and all sorts of stuff, like, and not to mention like just if they're playing a shithead of a person, which in most cases they are, they're just treating the people around them like shitheads too. But I think as the performer, having to live your life as someone else is also got to be incredibly like painful and difficult. And I'm also curious if that extends all the way back to the house, like they're living at home, like with their wife. And because I know some actors will like rent, like they'll totally detach themselves from their people and just live like secluded or surrounded by people who help sell this ideal. But man, I couldn't even screw that.
Yeah. And on the other hand, like you have Olivier who can get this kind of a performance without having to do all that.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's like really terrifying to me is that there was a lot of people exactly like this in real life. These guys that, that character was based on Joseph Mengele, who was, the White Angel. And obviously there's so many horrible things that came out of the Holocaust and all of that, and just the worst of people, what you could do to another human. It's horrifying, but
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the darkness of people when they have the power and permission to do horrific things. And like that's why that ending was so satisfying to me. It's like you got him good. Like he tortured him too by throwing the diamonds. Like he just
and he didn't even get him, right? Like he got himself. He engineered it in a way that Zell got himself.
Yeah, true. Yeah,
you know what I mean?
So
which I think is even like more poetic. But
yeah, I like it too. There was a lot of discussion, during the writing phase of how they're going to handle that. Like, is the audience going to feel satisfied enough? Because I think in the book, he just, Babe just gets him down there and then shoots him and kills him, and that's it.
That wouldn't have been as satisfying.
Yeah, I like the elaborate way it's kind of dragged out, and that he just kind of forces him into killing himself, really.
Yeah, like tries to make him eat his diamonds.
Well, if he ate all, like, I mean, they would tear his insides up. So he would.
That's my assumption. Yeah, like especially if he ate, however many. I mean, he had
one
thousands of diamonds there. Like, I mean, for sure.
And just like as he threw the handfuls away at him, like just that, that's each diamond was $15,000.
Yeah,
and that's those represented his life, Zell's life, really. That's what he was going to live on the rest of his life, and just throwing those away so casually, it was great.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, young me who was infatuated with like the thought of treasure hunting and like big, lockers of like gold doubloons and diamonds and rubies. I was like, oh man, all those diamonds would look super cool. And I was like, don't throw them in the water. Go get them.
Yeah, because like no one's probably ever going to find those.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe that not janitor guy, but the worker who was in there, maybe.
Well, let's think about that for a second, because so that was a sewage system, right?
I think so.
Like a drainage system, like wouldn't all that? So that's like gray water that eventually wouldn't that find its way to some sort of water plant of some sort? Yeah. And if that's the case, they'd probably all end up in a filter of some sort. And there's going to be the one guy, Ralph, who's like cleaning the filter one day. And he's like, Billy, come here.
We get the jackpot.
Yeah.
And then the division's going to go after those guys. So yeah, it looks like
the division have no idea where the diamonds are at this point.
Truth be told, that's how we financed ReconCinemation Studios.
We got some diamonds
in our water. Those diamonds. It came out of my sink. Really, it was crazy.
Just overflowing.
Um, going back to Janeway for a second, I think part of what he represents is the movie is capitalism. That, not he doesn't really care about any of the people involved. He just is all about getting ahead and getting what he needs to be successful.
Yeah, at whatever cost.
At whatever cost. He doesn't care, it's big business. That he may be in a relationship with Doc, but ultimately it was more important to the diamonds were more important than Doc.
Or whatever human cost. I should probably clarify.
Yep. So I kind of like that symbolism, and I like that. Yes, there are for sure there's plot holes about the division and what they're really doing, but I think they were doing it that way to make it scarier. That 2 years or what was it, 4 years post Nixon, 2 years post Nixon, post Watergate, that there's so much distrust of the government and fear about what they were actually doing. So it's really, it may not play as well now, but then it was like really, all these films are really hitting that nerve.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is like, I've been bagging on it, the back end really is super well done and like great to watch, like riveting, I think is a good way to put it. With the front end, like I just feel like it's disconnected, right? So, and I don't think it would have taken all that much to connect it. It just seems like there was like, well, we're just not going to do that. Like it wasn't important. There's like, we're just not going to do that. And, but I think that it's not like so flawed that it couldn't have been fixed, like it's just like an extra line here, an extra shot there. But in the grand scheme of the whole thing, when you watch it, it does feel really disjointed and kind of incomplete and just like, okay, well, all right, let's just ignore that and enjoy the last half here.
I didn't realize it was a book. It was the book written pretty like immediate. Like, was this a recent book? And then I'm assuming it's a little more robust about these themes or anything like that. I mean, I don't know if you've read it, John, or
I haven't read the book, but the William Goldman wrote the book in 1974, so it went from the book like straight into the movie. And I guess we'll talk a little bit about that now. He was paid $500,000, which is probably close to $3 million now. By Paramount, that bought Paramount with that money bought the rights to the novel, and that included his fee for becoming the screenwriter.
And he was established at this point, right? Like, I mean, he had written a couple things that were already super successful.
Yeah, Butch Cassidy was, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid was probably, his biggest claim to fame at the time. Yeah, and we actually recently in our Princess Bride episode, check that out in the archives, talked a lot about William Goldman too. He had already by this point actually written The Princess Bride and was shopping it around for 9 years. But
wow.
So that's kind of happening simultaneously. A movie that couldn't be more opposite in every way than this one. But he did a tremendous amount of script work, some of it credited, some of it not. He was probably considered, one of the top 5 screenwriters, if not top 3 screenwriters of the day. So yeah, I think a lot of this stuff, he was doing to his own script. Him and Schlesinger worked together to figure out what was going to translate and what wasn't. I'm not surprised that they really toned down the Janeway Doc relationship.
Yeah, it seemed like adding an extra complication to things that they already weren't explaining.
Right.
So like,
yeah, why? And I think it works. It's like, if you caught it, it's still in there. If you didn't catch it, it's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think, they were kind of tailoring some of this to the performers that they were casting. That Schlesinger is coming off of a film called The Day of the Locusts, which I'm sure you guys have not seen. I have, and it's a kind of a bananas movie. And
It's
he
like a
was so
beat down on
worried.
Hollywood, right? Like, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
And Schlesinger was really almost more of an avant-garde kind of filmmaker. If you watch, he had done Midnight Cowboy in 1969, also with Dustin Hoffman. And if you've seen that film, it's very, it was the beginning of the Hollywood New Wave, but it's very stylistic and very different. It's not a very straightforward film that it feels almost like a, independent film. But so he was so worried of where his standing was going to be after Day of the Locusts. He thought he was going to get, just totally like booted out of Hollywood. So he's like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll do Marathon Man. Yep, let's go right now.
Huh.
So
Smart move.
Yeah, exactly.
Take it quick.
It's like Walter Hill when he did The Warriors after The Driver, knowing that The Driver was going to tank. He's like, let's get Warriors going before they take that movie away from me. So
Is it true that how do you say his name?
Schlesinger.
Schlesinger. Is it true he did not want Dustin Hoffman in this?
Yeah, I think partially for the reasons we talked about that,
It's funny. He worked with him on Midnight Cowboy and he's like, I don't want to work with that guy again.
Yeah, no, I don't think it was that he didn't want to work with Hoffman. I think he didn't feel that Hoffman was really the best suited for this part. And Hoffman just lobbied and lobbied and lobbied. And I think
the 50-year-old college kid.
Yeah. He's 38 years old playing, 24 maybe?
Yeah, he does not look 38, man. He looks.
Yeah.
Everybody smoked back then, yeah.
Yeah, he looks weathered.
Yeah.
Roy Scheider was a leathery kind of guy forever.
Always. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he was only 32 in this. So.
Was really?
Sorry. That's.
I mean, like, what? That can't be.
It's totally hyperbole, but I'm just.
That'd be hilarious.
Making a joke.
Yeah, Hoffman was like, what at this point though was one of the biggest stars in the business. Leading up to this, listen to this lineup of films leading up to this one: The Graduate, Midnight Cowboy, Little Big Man, Straw Dogs, Papillon, Lenny, and All the President's Men.
No Tootsie yet, though.
No Tootsie yet.
Not yet,
but
it's coming.
But you kind of forget like how big he was. Like those were, all well-respected movies that I think they were all financial hits. I'm not sure if every one of them was, but certainly All the President's Men I think came out just a few months before this one. So he's still staying in that political world. I think he knew that was, a kind of a good spot for him to land.
Yeah. He played a character in my first movie at DreamWorks called Shifu in Kung Fu Panda. And it was, it's always interesting when method actors try to do voice acting because, it's out of the box for them. So he was an interesting record. He was not as interesting as Larry Sanders, who played a character named Vern in Over the Hedge, which was a turtle. And he would literally take a trash can and put it over his head and act as if he was in a turtle shell. So that was, interesting. But yeah, all right. He good old method.
How would a method actor do a voice character of a what was he, a rabbit?
A red panda.
He was a red panda.
Yeah. So took a minute for him to find his groove.
Yeah,
for sure.
I'm sure. And that would that method, he would continue doing that method style, at least all the way into the early 90s. He was, there's famous stories from Tootsie, from Rain Man that, there, I think even like Dick Tracy, he was still doing it there. And I know for sure on Wag the Dog, which was way in 97, that it was still, a thing that he was doing. So,
yeah.
But it's a balance that, hopefully you get this great performance without it being just kind of a nightmare to deal with, that you can kind of keep it at bay. I think it's really hard for a lot of actors to do both.
Yeah.
We talked about Roy Scheider and kind of everything he was in. Laurence Olivier was, again, at this point, was probably considered the greatest living actor. You know, all the Shakespearean films and all the theater he had done, that he was, I think when we were kind of growing up, high school, college years, it was like De Niro, Pacino were considered the greatest living actors of that era.
Like Keanu Reeves now.
Like, yeah,
Right.
Keanu now, for sure.
Or Nick Cage.
Both. Yeah. But Olivier was that prior to those guys. So, and he was in and out of this movie in the very beginning, that he was gonna do it, but he had been sick for a long time and wasn't well enough to do it. So they replaced him with Richard Widmark, who is another, actor from 40s, 50s, and 60s, great performer. And Schlesinger said that was like one of the most chilling rehearsals that he'd seen, that like was legitimately scared him in the rehearsals. But then Olivier got better and was like, no, I'm good, I can go. So they brought him back.
I can't imagine. I mean, he's so good at the role. I can't imagine what Wedmark must have done.
Yeah, I don't know. I wish we'd been able to see it, but this, to me, this is like, it's like an iconic villain role. It's so evil that it's not talked about enough, but it's just like, this is really a performance for actors to study, I think.
Are you to be trusted? No. Is that the truth? Or are you trying again to upset me?
I know that you're going to the bank sooner or later.
Perhaps I've already been.
If you had, you wouldn't be here talking to me, would you?
What else do you know?
I know that you're panicking. You think when you leave the bank, someone's going to rob you.
Who would do such a thing?
Obviously, you think I would.
Well, can I trust you?
You never could. You only had to.
We're talking of my safety.
May I be candid?
Yes.
I couldn't give a fuck about you.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, it's powerful. I mean, he is, well, because also, like, he has moments of like kind of natural human reactions, like when he's like, I don't know, like when he's realizing how many diamonds he has, and he's kind of like chipper and giddy, and kind of, this whole like kind of a natural human reaction. But then you see the scenes where he's like, evil, and you're like, fuck, dude, like, this guy is dark.
Yeah. And it starts really when he stabs. The minute he stabs Doc is the turn.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really see it at all up to that point. Like, you can see that he's obsessive about things, as he's like, like he's like shaving his head to give him the kind of the monk or the horseshoe hair look and all that stuff. Like, you can tell that he's like, like fully committed to whatever he's doing at the time. But like, you don't see that side of him until that moment. And I think it's really on display obviously in the torture scene.
Yeah. And let's talk about that scene. It's a very difficult scene to watch, especially I think like that did for dentistry what Jaws did for beaches.
Sure.
Like, people just stopped going to the dentist.
Well, apparently they cut it down a lot too, which I don't know if it would have been as bad or worse, because sometimes by not showing things, it's the sound of the drill, man, and the look in his eyes, and it's just like
all of them. It's Hoffman's reaction. It's he's like that first, when Zell first walks in the room and just is simply asking, is it safe? And Hoffman has
no idea
what he's talking about. So whatever answer he gives is the wrong answer.
Yeah.
Because if he says yes, then it just, either way, like, he's screwed. And as Zell kind of just like explains, sort of what he's going to do.
Yeah, he never actually tells him what information he wants. He just says, "Is it safe? Is it safe?"
Right.
Like,
right.
Also, why can't you just ask, "Where are my diamonds, dude?" You know, like,
right.
Because they all think
what?
think that he knows more than he does. Because when they
Because
assume,
they don't ask him the fucking questions.
well, but Janeway does. Janeway asks him, like, what did Doc tell you? They think that when Doc got back to his apartment and dies in Babe's arms, they think that he told him something. We know as an audience he didn't, because he couldn't even say Babe. Like, he didn't say anything. But
yeah, but
they're assuming
they're asking the question as if he has the information.
He
doesn't have the information, so they're making an assumption. So they're not really asking him the question. They're just saying,
Right.
What did he say?
Yeah.
Well, he said nothing. Well, we don't believe you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is a paradox. Like, hey, where did he tell you the diamonds are? What fucking diamonds?
Yeah.
Like, I don't, I mean, this guy's not like a trained, like,
right. Well, that's why
he's a big nerd.
He's not trained in like counterintelligence where, I mean, it's like,
well, that's how the
scene's great, but it's like, what the fuck? It's just another kind of one of those, like, well, come on, guys. Like,
be reasonable here.
So William Goldman, when writing that scene, actually, part of that came from his own experience as a kid, that he had a dentist that didn't use, as he was, a kid in the 40s or something, or 1950, early 50s. He had a dentist that didn't use Novocaine, and when he would work on his mouth, would like just plant his knee like in William Goldman's like stomach, so he couldn't move. So a lot of this came from
Did he come from Germany?
I don't know. But so it came from that, and then he consulted with his present day dentist and who kind of said, like, drilling into the nerve of a tooth without Novocaine is one of the most he said is the most painful thing you could do to somebody, because those nerves are so sensitive,
dude.
That
I had a cracked tooth once, and the nerve got infected, and I was flying on a plane, and as we were landing, the pressure change like basically irritated the thing, and literally there were spikes of pain going from like the back of my head, like down my face into my chest. Like, it was the most brutal pain I've ever felt in my life. It was horrible. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Oh.
So that's how they know, Zell knows that, like, if he knew, he would have told.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No one's holding on for diamonds for that amount of pain.
And the scene, immediately following that, where Janeway shows up, and it's like, he's rescuing him. And then that turn, the reveal of that turn, where, he's like, you think he's driving away, and he's also trying to get Babe to tell him what Doc said. And then you realize, like, oh no, he just drove him right back there. He's with them. He's one of them.
Yeah. Oh, it's the worst. I was like, oh,
like, how the hell is this guy going to get away?
Blade. Blanks, fake blade.
Right,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little hokey there, but
yeah.
Well, that switchblade was not a fake one. I mean, like, that was a heavy duty looking thing. I know.
But then we see that, and then we see the marathon running come back into play again. That's how he escapes, and he's able to just keep running. Like, even as much pain and as awful as he's feeling, like, instinctually he can run, and he can outrun this guy, and he can keep going.
Well, and marathon runners train to run through pain, right? Like, I mean, that's the whole thing.
It says I don't feel it, I just go.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And I realized, I think The Simpsons parodied his running. I could have sworn, I was like, I've seen Homer Simpson in pajama bottoms and a robe and running with the absolute manic look on his face down the street. I'm like, I've definitely, and I haven't watched The Simpsons in like 20 years, but like, I'm like, I know that scene. Like, I have seen that. But this is a movie ripe for a lot of references in pop culture. But anyway, yeah, that was so intense. I was like, oh, he's a marathon man. He's gonna go, like, he can run forever. They're never gonna get him. It was really thrilling, that part.
Yeah.
And then Janeway comes to save the day, only to betray him.
Yeah.
My heart was just dropping.
There's prior to that, just going back to Roy Scheider for a second.
Mhm.
There's that one moment after, when he leaves the opera and, his contact there has been killed, and he's like kind of in those, not tunnels, but those like exterior hallways where he's trying to meet up. He's supposed to meet up with Nicole, and he says it's not safe. Keep going. It's not safe. And she walks into the shadows, and you just hear this sound, and she just disappears. And then that soccer ball kind of, I don't know, like comes bouncing into frame slowly, and like, I don't know what that represented, but like that was just such a creepy moment. Like, what happened to her? Like, did someone just kill her? And I don't know, like, I think we've all had that experience of like being in the shadows at night and like hearing something, and imagination going. And
it reminded me of a scene in the movie The Changeling with George C. Scott, where there's this haunted house and there's this red ball that just like bounces down that comes out of the shadows and just bounces down the stairs, and you're just like, oh, it's very uneasy.
Yeah.
Yeah, did in this movie, did the killers buy a soccer ball earlier in the day, and then they were like, all right, we're gonna get it, and then
we should have seen that scene.
Like, that should have been set up in the beginning. We should have seen him running by a sports store, and there's a guy in a suit. This guy in a suit.
Yeah, the two guys, the two thugs that were Richard Bright and Mark Lawrence. Yeah.
Which, those guys.
Yeah, Richard Bright plays Al Neary in the Godfather films, one of my favorite characters.
Yeah. A nice supporting cast of villains through in this film as well.
Yeah.
That scene happened in Paris, right?
Yes, that was still in Paris. Yeah.
Well, that explains it. The French, they play soccer.
Yeah. Very, very, very soccer friendly in France. Most people are walking around. Most people walk around with soccer balls in France. We know this.
Yeah.
Especially during protests. Because France never not protests, by the way. They're always protesting.
No,
right?
There's always something.
There's something to protest. I mean, good for them. Anyway,
they did that, and because there was also like other union unrest in New York that is kind of subtly mentioned.
That's
and
right.
They put all that in there to just create this more like, unrest, with the government.
Yeah, everything's uneasy.
Yeah.
Instability everywhere.
I also like the hotel attack on Doc that was done by the Key Luke, I think is his name.
Yeah, Odd Job Light
from Gremlins. He's the owner of.
It felt very James Bond to me, that scene.
Oh, totally.
Like the fight scene.
Oh yeah.
In the hotel room, I was like,
yeah, he's whipping that Garrett around, or whatever you call it.
But that cut on his hand.
Brutal.
Yeah. Like you could almost feel that, like how painful, if you cut your hand, like, anywhere that.
A lot of visceral moments in the film that you can kind of just, that's this, as we're talking about some of them, I'm just shivering in my, my spine.
It's that gritty, those gritty 70s films,
70s
grainy film stock. You got
so
gritty. Well, the Steadicam. I mean, this is one of the first movies, if not the first movie, to really use Steadicam.
It's the second movie.
Second,
I think Bound for Glory was first, and then this, and then Rocky.
I mean, that just adds to uneasiness and frantic kind of imagery and it's all intentional. I get it.
You don't have to like it.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't.
But it's there.
I mean, again, the second half is, like, I'm going to lean into the second half. You guys.
Hell yeah. Oh, I'm with
Just
you.
start the movie
I
at
like
40,
that
45
part.
minutes.
Yeah.
And I want to mention Marta Keller too. Great performance by her.
Yeah.
As how involved is she? What level is she actually at with Zell and the confrontation scene? Something's up. Obviously, Roy Scheider sees it right away and fools her, and so something's up with her. And then,
but he's trained to cut through
Yeah.
the bullshit. you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, and he gets into it like right away.
Yeah. He's like, you're lying.
He makes up that whole story, and that she agrees to. But all right, should we check out how this did at the box office? A little box office glory.
Let's do it.
Sure.
Roll the tape.
All right, so we know there's not a lot of box office details back prior to the early '80s, but this is what we have. Marathon Man had a $6.5 million budget.
Whoa.
It was shot in late 1975 in Paris, New York, and Los Angeles at Paramount Studios. It was released on October 8th, 1976. It had a $28.2 million domestic run. It was the number 15 movie of 1976, right between Taxi Driver and The Outlaw Josie Wales.
You see that yet?
Outlaw Josie Wales?
Yeah.
I love that film.
Oh, okay. I thought you hadn't seen that. Maybe it's another.
No, High Plains Drifter is the one I haven't seen.
That's the one.
Yeah. The top three at the box office in 1976 were Rocky To Fly, which I've never heard of, and the Barbra Streisand, Chris Christopherson version of A Star Is Born.
Ooh.
Dustin Hoffman also has the number 6 film With All the President's Men. So, I mean,
Wow.
if you look at the list of films in 1976, it's really one of the greatest years in film history. You've got Rocky and Network and All the President's Men and Marathon Man and Taxi Driver and Outlaw Josie Wales. Like, there's so many great films from that year. This is just one of them. But yeah, what was kind of the fallout for this movie? Well, it was a big deal for Laurence Olivier. His film career had kind of been winding down by this point, and this really revived it for him in his last kind of stage of his career. He gets a Best Supporting Actor nomination for this. I think the first movie I remember seeing Laurence Olivier in was Clash of the Titans, where he plays Zeus.
Oh yeah. That's probably the first time I remember seeing him too.
Yeah, and he looks like younger in that movie, which is 1981. He did such a great job of like feeling older in this one. But
it's the hair, the white hair with the cool cut.
Yeah, the cool. It is a cool cut. Yeah.
And
all the cool kids are doing it.
Yeah,
those.
David, you got to get on the bandwagon with that haircut.
Oh, I was thinking about it. I definitely need a change. I'm gonna go all white and just shave the top off.
Yeah.
Once you go cool cut, you never go back. Just be careful.
Go for the George Costanza look.
It's permanent.
I'm probably more the Bruce Willis. That's where I'm gonna go.
Okay.
Just keep it one little like centimeter tall.
Yeah.
There you go.
This movie obviously is a showcase for Dustin Hoffman. It's solid showings by Roy Scheider and William Devane as well. It's got a number of iconic scenes that we all heard about growing up, and I think for rightfully so. And I think this is one of Schlesinger's masterpiece. Really his masterpiece film. I think, problems aside, there's so many memorable things about it that I think you can contribute to him. So
yeah, there's a lot of iconic moments for sure, and I think you feel the influences of this movie and so much afterwards,
Yeah.
So I would agree, even though I'm on the side of not quite loving this movie. Like, you can definitely feel its influences, which I think I said earlier. But
yeah, I think that's why, this isn't one of the top 70s movies that, on the whatever lists, the AFI lists and all of that. Sometimes they'll have like greatest villains and Laurence Olivier will be in there, but as a movie as a whole, it's not ranked up there with the Chinatowns, the Godfathers, the Taxi Drivers, because I think some of the disjointedness of it, and especially in that first half, are work against it, and that there is plot holes, admittedly so, but it's sort of like there's stuff that doesn't work, but there's also some great things in it that kind of counterbalance it. So ultimately, like, I enjoy watching the film. I can look past the flaws, but I know that they're there.
Yeah. There's no perfect movie.
Well, have you seen The Thing, David? Because
but I stand corrected.
Mac and me. Hello.
Cocoon. We need our other Cocoon.
Oh, we didn't even talk about it, dude.
You've watched Cocoon recently.
I finally found a copy. I bought it.
Yeah.
I own Cocoon, guys.
Nice.
We can totally review Cocoon now. I'll send it out. Everybody watch it. Listeners too, if you're interested, you gotta see this movie.
You will rent it out to our listeners. I think that's
I will. Absolutely.
Generous of you.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to cover that on a future episode. We need Joe Setta with us, though. We need the ultimate Cocoony power.
Bring everybody.
Yeah, everybody should join in.
Everybody,
all guest stars.
But for now, I'm excited to keep to stay in this world a little bit longer and take a look at another 70s paranoid thriller. Because next week we are going to look at Robert Redford in 3 Days of the Condor.
Ooh.
Hey, listeners, guess who picked that one?
David.
Guess who has scheduled this chunk of films right here?
Guess whose month it is?
I know not everyone loves the 70s movies. I know they're not for everybody, but we will go back there occasionally. So I'm
just bagging. These movies are great.
These movies are great. They don't make them like this anymore. Probably for good reason, but they don't make them this way. I'm kidding.
They just copy them.
You guys are gonna have fun with next week's episode. I think you guys.
No, I like that movie. So
yeah, that'll be fun.
I've seen that one. So.
And we've got a really fun lineup coming up after that. I'm not going to spoil what it is, but there's some big movies that I think we've been talking about covering for a long time. There's some anniversary years. We've got our 200th episode very special episode coming up for that. And as we mentioned at the top of the show, a mailbag episode. So again, hit us up on social media. We're ReconCinemation Podcast on Instagram and Twitter or X or whatever it's called now, and you can direct message us there. Any questions, throw it out there. We'll be happy to answer anything about film from yesteryear, today, ReconCinemation. We can answer questions about that. Let's see what you got. So we're handing you the keys to the show a little bit, but quick thank you and shout out to our friends E.K. Wimmer for the theme music, as always, and Curtis Moore for the poster. What a lovely
love those guys.
Yeah, they're the best. All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna go back to my shadowy government job with the division, where David actually is mentoring me and how the division works.
I recently recruited you.
Yeah. Now everybody knows. So
pretty sure broadcasting that is exactly how that works, guys. Well done.
We've changed our policies a lot. It's more
your secret agency is so secret.
We're more like just a private company with open recruiting.
Yeah.
Check us out on LinkedIn.com and Indeed.
Nice.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for taking a look back at Marathon Man.
Thank
I
you.
recommend everyone watch it. But know what it is going into it if you haven't seen it in a long time. So
Yeah.
Yeah, same. Go watch this thing.
Watch the second half. It's awesome.
Watch the whole thing.
Just kidding. Watch the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's worth it.
Watch the whole thing. Yeah, it's fine. It's not a
Totally
waste of
worth
time.
it.
Not a waste of time
and
at all.
so we're gonna go from Dustin Hoffman all the way to Robert Redford next week, and we'll see you then on ReconCinemation.
Take care.
Cowabunga.
Love you, Keanu.
That's understood.
Nice.
I know, but when I started bagging on Keanu, I was like, well, if he's listening,
Yeah,
you better know that I love him.
Do you miss home? I bet you do. Mint Jelly Man? What do you miss most of all? People? The country? Skiing?
I suppose all.
I'm not really that familiar with Switzerland. What part are you from?
Tiny place.
Thank you.
Verbier.
Verbier?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't believe it. What? There's this guy that works in my office, a ski bum. A real pain in the ass about skiing, excuse me. But he's always going on about Verbier. That's right at the at the foot of Mount Rosa, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
He says it's some of the best skiing in the world. Is that true?
Of course.
Is he 100% right?
Sure.
Then you must know Claude Lesueur, the instructor there. Have you skied with him?
Yeah.
Where is it? Verbier.
Verbier.
I've made all this up. There is no Mount Rosa in Verbier, and there is no Claude Lesueur. You're not Swiss, what are you? What are you?
Can't you guess?
Sure, German.
Anything else?
How long are your working papers good for?
Hey, wait a minute. Wait a minute. It's a joke. It's not funny.
I don't need work papers. I'm a student here. Je comprends vraiment
I
pas
don't
ce
know.
qu'il veut.
Whatever you do.
I'm
Many
trying to-
foreigners marry Americans to make things nice and legal. Then all of a sudden the marriages don't work out.
Is that what you think of me?
Look, stop it. Just
Don't
stop
you
it,
ask
man.
me if I care for him?
Why bother? You haven't told the truth so far.
But why don't you ask me if I love him? Why don't you...
Okay, wait a minute. It's all right, Elsa. Wait. Let her go. Why?
Because she's a phony. She's after something. Can't you see it?
Why don't you stay out of it?